On a chilly autumn evening, the streets of the city were bathed in the soft orange glow of streetlights. The air carried a faint crispness, signaling the arrival of fall. Judge Evelyn Carter, a woman known for her sharp mind and unwavering dedication to justice, was driving home after an enjoyable dinner with friends. Her car, a sleek black sedan, moved smoothly along the quiet roads. She had spent the evening laughing and sharing stories, a rare moment of relaxation in her otherwise busy life. As she approached an intersection, the traffic light ahead turned yellow. Evelyn slowed down gently, coming to a complete stop as the light switched to red. She glanced at her rearview mirror, ensuring no one was behind her, and waited patiently for the signal to change. It was a routine moment, one that happened countless times every day. But what happened next would turn this ordinary night into something extraordinary. Out of nowhere, flashing blue and red lights appeared in her mirrors. A police cruiser pulled up behind her, its siren wailing briefly before falling silent. Evelyn frowned, confused. She hadn't run the red light, she was certain of it. Still, she rolled down her window and prepared to speak with the officers, assuming there might be some misunderstanding. Two officers stepped out of the cruiser. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his stance exuding authority. His nameplate read, Officer Daniels. The other, shorter but equally imposing, introduced himself as Officer Grayson. Both men wore expressions that seemed more accusatory than curious. They approached her car cautiously, their hands resting near their belts close to their weapons. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Daniels began, his tone clipped and formal. "Do you know why we stopped you?" Evelyn kept her voice calm and polite. "I'm not sure. I stopped at the red light, so I don't think I did anything wrong." Daniels exchanged a glance with Grayson, who smirked slightly. "We observed you running the light back there," Daniels said firmly. "You failed to come to a full stop." Evelyn shook her head, her confusion deepening. "That's not correct. I came to a complete stop. There's no way I ran the light." Grayson leaned closer, peering into the car. His eyes scanned the interior, lingering on the leather seats and dashboard. "Nice ride you've got here," he remarked, his tone laced with suspicion. "How does someone like you afford a car like this?" The comment caught Evelyn off guard. "Someone like you." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. She felt a flicker of unease but pushed it aside. These were police officers, representatives of the law. Surely they wouldn't act without cause. "I work hard for what I have," Evelyn replied evenly. "And again, I didn't run the light. If you check the cameras nearby, you'll see I stopped completely." Daniels ignored her explanation. Instead, he asked for her license and registration. Evelyn complied, reaching into her glove compartment to retrieve the documents. As she handed them over, she noticed the way both officers scrutinized her movements, as if expecting her to pull something suspicious from the car. While Daniels examined her paperwork, Grayson continued to study her. "What do you do for a living?" he asked abruptly. "I'm a federal judge," Evelyn answered, meeting his gaze steadily. For a brief moment, Grayson looked taken aback. Then he chuckled, exchanging another glance with Daniels. "A judge, huh? That's quite the claim." Evelyn felt a pang of frustration but remained composed. "It's not a claim. It's the truth. You can verify it if you'd like." Daniels finally spoke up, his tone dismissive. "Even judges make mistakes. Running a red light is still breaking the law." Before Evelyn could respond, Grayson chimed in. "Let's just say we're going to play it safe and bring you in for questioning. We need to confirm your story." Evelyn's heart sank. This was spiraling out of control. "That's unnecessary," she protested. "You're making a mistake. I haven't done anything wrong." But the officers weren't listening. They insisted on searching her vehicle, citing protocol. Despite her protests, they proceeded to rummage through her belongings, tossing items carelessly onto the ground. Evelyn clenched her fists, biting back the urge to argue further. She knew raising her voice wouldn't help. It might only escalate the situation. As the minutes ticked by, Evelyn's mind raced. She thought about all the cases she had presided over, all the injustices she had seen firsthand. And now here she was, experiencing something similar herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. These officers, sworn to uphold the law, were trampling on her rights without a shred of evidence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daniels announced that she was under arrest. "Step out of the vehicle, please," he instructed, his tone cold and impersonal. Evelyn hesitated, then slowly complied. As they placed handcuffs around her wrists, she couldn't help but notice the smug expressions on their faces. It was as if they took pleasure in asserting their dominance over her. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she refused to let it break her spirit. The drive to the precinct was tense and silent. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. She thought about her family, her colleagues, and the countless individuals who had faced similar treatment simply because of the color of their skin. This wasn't just about her. It was about a system that allowed such abuses to happen. When they arrived at the station, Evelyn was led inside and processed like any other suspect. Her mugshot was taken, her fingerprints recorded. Each step felt surreal, like she was watching someone else go through the motions. Yet, amidst the chaos, a small part of her remained focused. She knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Whatever happened next, she vowed to fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. And so, as the hours dragged on and the reality of her situation settled in, Evelyn Carter prepared to take on the very system she had devoted her life to serving. Little did the officers know their actions that night would set off a chain reaction, one that would challenge them, the department, and the nation itself. The precinct was a dimly lit, sterile building with harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork, mingling with the faint metallic tang of handcuffs and worn-out furniture. Evelyn Carter sat on a cold, hard bench in the corner of the room, her hands still cuffed behind her back. Though outwardly calm, her mind raced with thoughts of how quickly her evening had spiraled out of control. Around her, the station bustled with activity. Officers moved about, some chatting casually, others typing furiously at their desks. No one seemed particularly concerned about the woman sitting quietly in the corner. To them, she was just another suspect, another faceless individual caught up in the system. But Evelyn knew better. She understood the weight of what was happening, not just to her but to countless others who didn't have the privilege or resources she did. As time dragged on, Evelyn observed everything around her. She noticed how Officer Daniels and Grayson joked with their colleagues, laughing loudly as if nothing unusual had occurred. Their laughter grated on her nerves, each chuckle a reminder of the injustice unfolding before her eyes. They spoke freely, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that she could hear every word they said. "Man, I don't know where she got that fancy car," Grayson said, leaning against a desk. His tone was mocking, dripping with condescension. "Probably. Bought it off someone shady," Daniel smirked, shaking his head. "Yeah, right, judges, please, you really believe that?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. She wanted to speak up to defend herself, but she held her tongue. This wasn't the time or place. Instead, she focused on memorizing details, their names, badge numbers, anything that might prove useful later. Every insult, every careless remark only fueled her determination to hold them accountable. After what felt like an eternity, a young officer approached Evelyn. He looked nervous, avoiding eye contact as he unlocked her handcuffs. "You can make a phone call now," he muttered, gesturing toward a small booth in the corner of the room. Evelyn stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from her clothes. Her movements were deliberate, her posture regal despite the circumstances. She walked over to the phone, dialing a number from memory. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" came the groggy reply. It was late, and her friend Sarah had clearly been asleep. "Sarah, it's me, Evelyn," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I need your help." There was a pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Evelyn, are you okay? What happened?" "I'll explain everything later," Evelyn replied. Right now, I need you to call Marcus. Tell him I've been arrested, and ask him to come down here immediately. Marcus was one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the city, and a close friend. Evelyn trusted him implicitly, knowing he would understand the gravity of the situation and act swiftly. After hanging up, she returned to her seat, feeling a small sense of relief wash over her. Help was on the way. Meanwhile, Daniels and Grayson continued their routine, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing outside the precinct walls. They filled out paperwork, jotting down notes about the alleged traffic violation. Their report painted a picture far removed from reality, one where Evelyn had blatantly disregarded the law and Ressie. The days following Evelyn Carter's release from the precinct were a whirlwind of activity. News of her wrongful arrest spread like wildfire, igniting conversations across the city and beyond. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage as people shared snippets of her story, amplifying calls for accountability. Journalists scrambled to piece together what had happened, while civil rights organizations rallied behind her cause. The case quickly became a symbol of the broader struggles faced by marginalized communities at the hands of law enforcement. Evelyn wasted no time in addressing the public. Standing on the steps of her home, flanked by Marcus, her attorney, and Sarah, who had taken on an unofficial role as her spokesperson, she delivered a powerful statement. Her voice was steady but filled with conviction as she spoke directly to the cameras. "This is not just about me," she began, her eyes scanning. The crowd of reporters and supporters gathered before her. "It's about every person who has been wrongfully targeted because of the color of their skin. What happened to me that night was not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of systemic racism, abuse of power, and unchecked bias within our justice system." Her words struck a chord, resonating deeply with those who had long felt silenced or dismissed. As footage of her speech aired on national news, hashtags like Justice for Evelyn and Accountability Now began trending online. Protesters took to the streets holding signs that read, "Respect Black Lives" and "Enough is Enough." The movement grew rapidly, drawing support from activists, politicians, and even celebrities. Meanwhile, the fallout inside the police department was equally intense. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into Daniels and Grayson's conduct, scrutinizing everything from their initial traffic stop to their handling of Evelyn's arrest. Surveillance footage from nearby traffic cameras confirmed what Evelyn had claimed all along. She had stopped at the red light. There was no evidence to support their allegations, but it wasn't just the lack of evidence that raised eyebrows. It was the officer's blatant disregard for proper procedure. Investigators uncovered numerous procedural violations during their review of the case. For one, Daniels and Grayson hadn't followed standard protocols when searching Evelyn's vehicle. They also failed to document key details accurately, instead fabricating information to justify their actions. Their behavior painted a troubling picture of incompetence and prejudice. As the investigation unfolded, pressure mounted on city officials to take action. Community leaders organized town hall meetings, demanding transparency and reform. Residents packed auditoriums, sharing personal stories of mistreatment at the hands of police officers. Many expressed frustration over years of unaddressed grievances, pointing out how often these incidents ended without consequences for those responsible. Daniels and Grayson found themselves under intense scrutiny. Once confident in their authority, they now faced mounting criticism both publicly and privately. Fellow officers distanced themselves, fearing association might tarnish their own reputations. Even their supervisors, who had previously turned a blind eye to their discriminatory behavior, couldn't shield them this time. Despite the growing backlash, Daniels and Grayson attempted to defend their actions. In interviews with internal investigators, they claimed they had acted based on reasonable suspicion and insisted they were simply doing their jobs. But their excuses fell flat, especially when confronted with the damning audio recording Evelyn had captured using her father's old voice recorder. The recording revealed shocking moments of prejudice and disrespect. At one point, Grayson could be heard speculating about how Evelyn, a successful black woman, could afford such a nice car. Another clip captured Daniels dismissing her claim of being a federal judge, mocking her assertion as if it were absurd. These remarks provided irrefutable proof of their biased mindset, making it impossible for anyone to argue they had acted impartially. Public opinion shifted dramatically against the officers. Calls for their termination grew louder, with petitions circulating online garnering hundreds of thousands of signatures. Civil rights groups filed formal complaints, urging the district attorney to pursue criminal charges. The pressure became so overwhelming that even the police chief, known for his reluctance to discipline officers, announced he would cooperate fully with the investigation. For Evelyn, the fight wasn't just about punishing Daniels and Grayson, it was about dismantling the structures that allowed such injustices to occur in the first place. She partnered with grassroots organizations, lending her voice and expertise to campaigns advocating for policy changes. Together, they pushed for reforms like mandatory implicit bias training for law enforcement, stricter oversight mechanisms, and greater transparency in disciplinary proceedings. Her efforts inspired others to join the cause. Lawyers volunteered their services to assist victims of police misconduct, while educators incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curricula. Artists created murals honoring Evelyn's courage, turning blank walls into vibrant tributes to resilience and hope. The ripple effect of her activism reached far beyond the courtroom, sparking meaningful dialogue and inspiring action. However, not everyone supported Evelyn's crusade. Some critics accused her of playing the race card, suggesting she was exaggerating the severity of the incident for personal gain. Others argued that pursuing charges against Daniels and Grayson was excessive, claiming they were merely doing their job. A few colleagues within the legal community whispered disapprovingly, implying she should have shown leniency given their roles as officers. These criticisms stung, but Evelyn refused to let them derail her mission. She understood that change rarely came without resistance, and she was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Marcus by her side, she pressed forward, determined to hold Daniels and Grayson accountable, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. The case eventually made its way to court, where Daniels and Grayson stood trial for misconduct and violating Evelyn's civil rights. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including the surveillance footage and audio recordings, painting a damning portrait of their actions that night. Defense attorneys tried to downplay the severity of their behavior, framing it as a simple misunderstanding exacerbated by stress and fatigue. But the jury wasn't swayed. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the verdict came down: guilty on all counts. Daniels and Grayson were sentenced to significant jail time, marking a rare victory in cases involving police misconduct. The decision sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies nationwide, serving as a stark reminder that no one was above the law, not even those tasked with enforcing it. For Evelyn, the outcome was bittersweet. While she felt vindicated, she knew the real work was only beginning. The trial had exposed deep-seated issues within the justice system, issues that couldn't be resolved overnight. Still, she remained hopeful. Every step forward, no matter how small, brought society closer to true equality. As she reflected on the journey thus far, Evelyn realized something profound. Her arrest, though unjust, had given her a unique platform. It had forced people to confront uncomfortable truths and ignited a movement that showed no signs of slowing down. And though the road ahead promised to be long and difficult, she was ready to walk it, one courageous step at a time. The conviction of officers Daniels and Grayson marked a significant victory, but it was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The verdict sent ripples through the community, sparking both celebration and reflection. For many, it was a moment of vindication, a rare instance where justice seemed to prevail against systemic inequality. But for Evelyn Carter, the fight was far from over. She knew that holding two officers accountable wasn't enough to dismantle the deeply entrenched biases within law enforcement. True change required more than punishment. It demanded transformation. In the weeks following the trial, Evelyn threw herself into advocacy work with renewed vigor. She partnered with civil rights organizations, grassroots activists, and legal experts to draft comprehensive policy proposals aimed at reforming policing practices. Her goal was clear: to create systems that prioritized accountability, transparency, and fairness. She believed these changes could prevent others from enduring what she had gone through, and worse. One of her first initiatives focused on mandatory bias training for all law enforcement officers. Evelyn argued that understanding implicit bias wasn't just about sensitivity. It was about ensuring officers approached every situation with impartiality and respect. Drawing from her own experience, she emphasized the importance of recognizing how prejudices could cloud judgment and lead to harmful outcomes. Bias isn't always intentional, she explained during a televised interview, but its impact is real and we must address it head-on. To make this initiative effective, Evelyn worked closely with psychologists and educators to design interactive training programs. These sessions went beyond lectures or PowerPoint slides. They included role-playing exercises, case studies, and open discussions designed to challenge participants' assumptions. Office-y. Years after the arrest that changed her life, Evelyn Carter found herself standing on a stage in front of thousands of people. The room buzzed with energy as attendees leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear from the woman who had become a symbol of resilience and justice. It was the annual National Justice Summit, an event dedicated to discussing systemic reform and celebrating those working tirelessly for equality. As Evelyn adjusted the microphone and looked out at the diverse crowd, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support she'd received, for the progress made, and for the opportunity to continue fighting for what was right. Evelyn began her speech by recounting the events of that autumn evening years ago: the traffic stop, the dismissive remarks, the wrongful arrest. She didn't shy away from sharing the fear and frustration she'd felt during those hours at the precinct. That night taught me something I already knew intellectually, but hadn't fully grasped emotionally, she said. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how high you rise, there are systems designed to remind certain groups of their place. But it also taught me that we have the power to challenge those systems and win. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. Evelyn wasn't just speaking about her own experience. She was giving voice to countless others who had faced similar injustices, but never had the platform to share their stories. Her courage had inspired them to speak up, to demand accountability, and to believe that change was possible. The reforms Evelyn championed had begun to take root across the country. Independent review boards were now standard in most major cities, providing oversight where none had existed before. Mandatory bias training programs had transformed how officers interacted with the public, fostering greater empathy and understanding. Body cameras had become ubiquitous, ensuring transparency in police interactions and holding both officers and civilians accountable. These changes weren't perfect, they couldn't undo decades of harm, but they represented meaningful steps toward a more equitable society. One of Evelyn's proudest achievements was the establishment of the Justice Equity Fund, a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting victims of police misconduct and advocating for policy reform. Through the fund, Evelyn partnered with lawyers, activists, and community leaders to provide free legal assistance to individuals seeking justice. They also launched educational campaigns to teach communities about their rights and how to navigate the legal system effectively. For many, the fund became a lifeline, a source of hope when all else seemed lost. But perhaps the most profound impact of Evelyn's work was the cultural shift it sparked. Conversations about race, privilege, and systemic inequality entered mainstream discourse in ways they hadn't before. Schools incorporated lessons on civil rights history into their curricula, while workplaces implemented diversity and inclusion initiatives. Artists, musicians, and filmmakers used their platforms to highlight stories of injustice, amplifying voices that had long been silenced. Even corporations began reevaluating their practices, pledging to address inequities within their ranks. Of course, not everyone welcomed these changes. Resistance persisted, often manifesting in subtle yet insidious ways. Some critics accused Evelyn of dividing society, claiming her advocacy created unnecessary tension between law enforcement and the public. Others dismissed her efforts as performative, arguing that true reform required more than policy changes. It demanded a fundamental shift in mindset. While Evelyn acknowledged the validity of some critiques, she remained undeterred. "Progress is messy," she once remarked. "It's uncomfortable and imperfect. But staying silent isn't an option." As time passed, Daniels and Grayson faded into obscurity, their names synonymous with disgrace. After serving their sentences, they struggled to reintegrate into society. Few employers were willing to hire former officers convicted of misconduct, leaving them to grapple with the consequences of their actions. In interviews conducted years later, both men expressed regret, though their apologies rang hollow to many. "We were just doing our jobs," Grayson said in one documentary. "I guess we let our biases get the better of us." Evelyn watched the interview with mixed emotions. While she didn't harbor hatred toward them, she couldn't forgive their refusal to take full responsibility for the harm they'd caused. Despite the challenges she faced, Evelyn remained committed to mentoring the next generation of leaders. She took special interest in young women of color, pursuing careers in law and public service, offering guidance, encouragement, and financial support through scholarships funded by the Justice Equity Fund. Many of her mentees went on to achieve remarkable success, crediting Evelyn with helping them navigate obstacles and stay focused on their goals. "She taught me that justice isn't just about winning cases," one former mentee recalled. "It's about lifting others up and creating opportunities for them to thrive." In her personal life, Evelyn found joy in simple pleasures, spending time with family, tending to her garden, and reading books that expanded her perspective. Friends often teased her about slowing down, urging her to take vacations or indulge in hobbies. But Evelyn couldn't imagine stepping away entirely, not when there was still so much work to be done. "Rest is important," she admitted, "but so is purpose, and my purpose has always been clear." As she concluded her speech at the summit, Evelyn paused, scanning the faces of those gathered before her. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said softly. "It requires patience, persistence, and faith in the possibility of a better tomorrow. But if we stand together, if we refuse to accept anything less than fairness and dignity for all, then we can build a world where justice isn't the exception. It's the rule." The audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Evelyn smiled, humbled by the outpouring of support. As she stepped off the stage, she reflected on how far she'd come since that chilly autumn night. Her journey had been marked by pain and triumph, setbacks and victories. Yet through it all she had remained steadfast in her belief that justice was worth fighting for. And so, Evelyn Carter continued forward, driven by the knowledge that her legacy wouldn't be defined by the injustices she endured, but by the strides she helped make toward a fairer, more compassionate world. For every person who had ever felt powerless, for every voice that had been silenced, she stood as a beacon of hope. A reminder that even in the face of adversity, courage and determination could spark lasting change.